ready?
Okay, in the mics, please. 5, 4, 3, 2, action!
Welcome to the Weekend UpTake. We are coming to you live from downtown St. Paul in the shadow of Minnesota's capital. Today we have Jim Norton sitting down with Pope Joseph.
Jennifer? Jim's not here today. He's in Mexico.
He's in where?
He's in Mexico. He's either reporting on the drug wars or eating tacos El Pastor in Mexico City.
Okay, Jim Norton officially in Mexico with the drug cartel. What do we do? Why don't
you just toss it to Noah and we'll crack open some beers?
Okay, Noah Kunin is coming up next to give us the update on what's going on with the Coleman versus Franken trial. Noah.
They will now include votes they call illegal in the count. If these points stand in any final order of the court, it will give us no choice but to appeal that order to the Minnesota Supreme Court. It is unfortunate that the court has taken this tact because it continues to disenfranchise thousands of Minnesotans whose votes should be counted, whose votes would have been counted had they lived in just a different jurisdiction. So we are disappointed, but we feel the court is wrong, and we will appeal.
Welcome back to the Weekend UpTake. I'm Tom Elko. With me here is Noah Kunin, senior political correspondent for the UpTake, and he's going to give us all the details about the latest developments in the Coleman-Franken saga. Noah?
Well, as you just heard, Ben Ginsburg, chief spokesman and occasional letter-licker of the Coleman campaign. What he just was talking about was how even though the Election Contest Tribunal has agreed to count 400 ballots, that's much, much less than the 4,797 ballots rejected absentees that the Coleman campaign originally wanted counted. Now, the problem that they've outlined here is that basically some types of ballots were accepted on Election Day that were later on not accepted during the trial section, and they consider that a violation of equal protection, but that's a hotly contested subject among legal circles.
But why only these 400?
These 400 strictly adhered to a certain set of statutory standards Minnesota has set up. Now, Minnesota is actually one of the rare states that doesn't go along with what's called the democracy canon. And the democracy canon is a set of legal principles saying that regardless of what a state's election law is, you have to err on the side of enfranchising a voter. Minnesota is a rare state that posits absentee balloting as separate from that, as a privilege and not a right. So as a result, they had several different rules that all these ballots needed to be passed to be included. They needed to be registered in that precinct that their absentee ballot ended up in. They needed to have proven they didn't vote twice. They needed to have proven they filled out an absentee ballot application. They needed to have a signature on it, legitimate, readable, and it needed to be properly witnessed or signed by a notary. So unless a ballot met all those categories and that evidence was presented to the election contest court, it didn't get in. So according to the court, only 400 even got close to meeting these requirements.
So what's going to be the process over the next couple of days, weeks? How long will this take, and what can we expect?
Most observers are saying that when these ballots are opened on Tuesday, there's almost no chance Coleman could come out, and observers on both sides of the political aisle are saying that. The Coleman campaign has made clear they're going to appeal to the Minnesota Supreme Court. It can go directly to them. Afterwards, if the Minnesota Supreme Court does not rule in Coleman's favor, they can actually apply directly with a writ to the U.S. Supreme Court. They don't need to go through federal appeals court or anything like that. However, the U.S. Supreme Court has complete discretion on when to hear the case, and after they've heard it, how long to take to decide. It's completely up to them. They can take as long or as little time as they so choose.
So what can we expect from the UpTake during this whole process?
Well, the UpTake on Tuesday is going to be covering the 400 ballots being opened live right here on this channel. And then as the case goes on, we'll certainly bring you the Minnesota Supreme Court oral arguments live. Again, Coleman will be arguing that both equal protection and possibly even due process was violated by different counties adhering to these statutes in different degrees of specificity.
UpTake Senior Political Correspondent Noah Kunin. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom.
Coming up, our roundtable will discuss gay marriage in Iowa, Palente's pickle, and other issues of the day. But first, this pre-recorded interview from Min Stories featuring Jeremy Iggers of the Twin Cities Media Alliance, Mike Wassener of St. Paul Neighborhood Network, and Japanese Media Studies professor Shinji Uzomi, discussing free speech in a free society.
Now, how hard would it be, for example, for somebody with a Nazi show to get on SPNN?
You know, I think you'd have to learn how to white balance. You'd know. Sorry. Not hard, but is it worth it for you? If let's say you're, if you're a really, sound neo-Nazi organizer, is it really worth it for you? We get about 10,000 submissions from the public a year. So we get about 10,000 half hours of content from the community. I've had to deal with pornography or hate speech 3 times in 9 years.
Really? Huh.
Right. I would say there is politically charged or virulent speech very often within religious communities. Okay, but it's typically protected speech because it's religious. And I think the odds of you finding something that's hateful are higher if you look at religious content in America than if you look at like someone who's like an organized neo-Nazi. Well, I don't think they're really organized first. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think there was, in St. Paul's instance, there was an incident in St. Paul like in 1992 with a submission from a white supremacist organization. 1992. That's 17 years ago.
But in theory,
it's one program.
In theory, if somebody submitted the paperwork, they would get a show, or they would.
They would be able to submit a program.
And in theory,
as long as they weren't breaking any local laws, and they owned the content.
And in theory, you would have to put it on the air.
Yeah.
Or on the cable. Or
right. Now, the question that often comes to mind is what is the appropriate scheduling for a community?
3 a.m.
Conceivable.
Yeah.
We ask our producers if the content that they're producing is adult in nature or not. Because I simply don't think it's in our community's interest to be shoving raw material at youngsters. I mean, that's not like a community good that I hold, in terms of and it's actually something that our organization agrees to. And actually the producers agree to it too. But we don't typically ask someone if they do hate speech. I mean, for one thing, there isn't a sound legal definition under Minnesota or federal law of hate speech when it comes to content. So if it's curious, if there was like a local ordinance in St. Paul about the things you can and can't say, my guess is that we'd have to abide by it if it was upheld to be constitutional.
Huh.
Right. Now, as long as whatever you say is within the letter of the law, and you own the rights to it, it's your speech in the United States. And then you'd have the right to put something on our channel. Whether or not I have the right to play it 24 hours a day or once at 3 a.m. is a whole other question.
Welcome back to the Weekend Uptake. I'm your host, Tom Elko. Here we are at the round table with this week's guest, Paul Schmelzer, editor-in-chief of the Minnesota Independent, filmmaker and founder of MinStories.com, Chuck Olsen, and Mitch Berg, co-host of the Northern Alliance Raido Network and blogger at Shot in the Dark. Welcome, everyone. First topic is Palente's pickle. The Politico prominently featured a story this week stating that the legal fight between Al Franken and Norm Coleman is headed to the desk of Governor Palente, a no-win predicament for a Minnesota Republican with his eye on the White House in 2012. Is this really the predicament Politico claims it to be? Mitch?
Well, two things jump to mind about that. First of all, Palente is a lawyer. He's going to follow the law, and the law is more or less silent on what you're supposed to do in these situations here. There's two things that jump to mind here. First of all, Could you name perhaps 1 in 10,000 Minnesota voters who could explain even close to how it was we got from 200 votes ahead to 300, 400 votes behind here 5 months later? I mean, Pawlenty has to look ahead to safeguarding the validity of Minnesota's electoral system. But I think Politico also gives up its kind of wonky background here by explaining this as a pickle at all. Look at the bright side. If you're Governor Pawlenty, you have at least one big win potentially out there, and that is, even if he loses, what do we get? Senator Al Franken. I mean, it's going to be as big of an embarrassment as Jesse Ventura, for Christ's sake. I mean, it's really a win-win for Pawlenty, I think.
Paul?
I'm of two minds of it. I don't know. I mean, I do think that it poses some problems for Pawlenty because he's got an election coming up in 2010. If he loses that, that's going to be some problems for him, I think. But I also think that, I think he will probably. I mean, there are legal precedents that he has to follow. I think that's one thing. But on the other hand, I kind of wonder about. I mean, I just saw the U.S. survey. What is it? Survey USA just came out with a new poll that shows Pawlenty back above 50%. Only 6 times in 45 polling sessions for them has he been below 50%. And that's, some people could say that means he's weak, that last month he was down to, what was it, the previous month it was 49%. So he might be seen as vulnerable. It's hard to say. I can kind of see both sides of it.
Chuck?
Hard to say, Tom. I mean, first of all, he hasn't said if he's going to run. But after that poll came out, Bob Collins called Pawlenty like the Teflon governor. He's so resilient, and I'm not really convinced. I'd like to see some data as to whether Minnesotans really are. Is there going to be some kind of backlash, or is it going to just be seen as just a continuation of this never-ending Senate race? And I'm not really convinced that he would pay a political price if he did choose to run. So inconclusive.
Yeah,
and I also think that Politico article was short-sighted. I mean, it's looking at is he going to run for president? But what about who's going to run for galactic president in 2012?
Or even if he's going to run for governor in 2010.
Or that as well.
Do you have an opinion on that?
I think he's going to run. I don't think he has anything to lose by running. I think he's
except for the governor's race.
Well, he's not going to lose the governor's race. He's going to. I don't see anybody in the Democratic stable who has a snowball's chance of hell of upsetting him. He is a Teflon governor. He has managed to make. What they say, when life gives you a lemonade, find someone the life gave vodka to and make lemon drops. That's what he's done for the last, his entire term. And he's, I think this whole fracas, he has the potential here to turn this whole Senate recount fracas into a big win for him, frankly. Because what's the worst thing to happen? Al Franken. Again, just the guy is PR on the hoof for the GOP once he actually gets seated. I mean, how can he lose?
We're going to move on to topic 2, which is takes us south of the border down to Iowa, where the Supreme Court recently ruled that a ban on gay marriage violates the constitutional rights of homosexuals, regardless of the popular opinion in Iowa. The question is this still a hot-button issue that served to split the popular vote in 2004 during the presidential election? And if so, will that debate still be relevant in 2012 as the presidential hopefuls start to make the rounds in Iowa? Paul?
I think it'll still be an issue in the next election, but I think that day by day the issue kind of loses its currency. That's what I think. I think Iowa is a great decision, and I think it's a very different situation than Minnesota, but I think no matter what, it's still going to be something that people that want to sort of splinter the Republican Party are going to call on.
Chuck?
I think what's interesting about that decision is it's coming out of Iowa, and rather than gay San Francisco, or it's not a coastal thing. It's something now that's coming out of the heart of the Midwest, and it sort of seems like we're going to end up with this patchwork of different legal situations for gay marriage across the country. It's just on a continuum to becoming more mainstream. So I think it's going to be an issue, but I think there's probably going to be bigger issues to worry about in 2012, I would guess, than some of these hot-button cultural issues.
Yeah, is it dependent on whether the economy stays on top of everyone's mind? Does that kind of take away from the little effectiveness. And I know the Republican base is going to be concerned about this issue regardless, but moving beyond the Republican base.
Well, I think what we saw in California and Oregon over the last couple of years is not only is the Republican base concerned about it, but so is the vast majority of the Democratic base. I mean, we're talking Proposition 8 won by an overwhelming margin in California. Similar measures in 2004 won in Oregon. I mean, the most Lola Granola, left-wing Volvo-driving, Prius-hugging state in the Union voted overwhelmingly to ban gay marriage. Look, I wouldn't read too much into this happening in Iowa. Courts, as I tell people on both sides of the aisle, courts interpret the law. The law is what it says it is, and they determined that the Iowa Constitution does not forbid gay marriage, as it is written. So there will be an amendment to the Constitution, and the people of Iowa or Oregon or California will make the necessary changes to their laws so that it reads appropriately to match what the vast majority of people on both sides of the aisle believe. It's not a hot-button issue for me, and of course the economy will trump it, but this is an issue where I don't believe the gay marriage movement has come anywhere near close to making the sale on the vast majority of people, whatever their politics. And that's, again, I wish nothing against gay marriage personally. I support civil unions, but I just don't think that the gay marriage proponents have made the sale with anyone outside of the legal community so far.
Are constitutional amendments a proper way to handle this?
No, I don't. I don't believe that they're a proper way to handle it, and furthermore, they don't need to be handled there. I mean, there's any number of places in any state's statutory body of law that you can put a measure like this, and I'm sure that's what the citizens of Iowa are burning up the phone lines to the Capitol right now to enact here. I bet you see something out of the Iowa legislature sooner than later, however you feel about the issue.
But it will have to amend the Constitution regardless.
Yeah, they will. You're right.
Whatever happens, it'll have to amend the Constitution.
That's true.
You know, Tom, if I can just jump in here, as someone who is gay married myself, I think I can speak to this issue. I have a civil union, so I like to say I'm gay married, and I just look forward to the day when my lifestyle is accepted.
Hi, Lori. Moving on to topic 3. From nuclear moratoriums to medical marijuana, there are 159 bills in the Minnesota legislature that are still kind of viable, meaning that they've had 2 prior readings and have been reported out of 1 or more standing committees. I have no idea what the original number was, but I'm pretty sure it's staggering. Which legislation are you all keeping an eye on as the session progresses here? And we'll start with you, Chuck.
Well, Tom, that would be the medical marijuana bill.
Yes.
I need to make a disclaimer before I even talk about that, but it's not the one you think I'm going to make. I went up to Ely to interview. It was a client gig, doing a video interview with a guy who suffers from a degenerative spine disease. So he made a video for the marijuana policy project. And he has a kitchen table full of empty drug bottles. And basically all these drugs prevent him from sleeping, prevent him from just having any kind of normal life, having an appetite, things like that. So there are all kinds of powerful arguments that have been made. Similar arguments were made in the Capitol, showing the medical benefits of medical marijuana. So at this point, I think it's cleared 4 Senate committees and is ready for a Senate vote.
And this is the rare bill that has bipartisan support. That we don't see too many of those at the legislature. Does that help it? Will that help carry it through the legislature?
Oh, me? Mitch? Oh, I for one hope so. I think the war on drugs as a whole is the real quagmire. It's the real war we've lost. We've lost more people to the war on drugs than we lost in Vietnam and Korea put together. I think it's time to call a truce, legalize medical marijuana. I think you're finding that it's the thing that dared not speak its name for a couple generations of Republicans and conservatives, and I think that's finally starting to fracture a little bit. And I'm saying, even though I've never smoked so much as a joint in my life, I'm all for it. So
we'll test you later, Paul.
So I've been told.
Paul, your Minnesota Independents covered this issue quite a bit. Do you think it has the momentum to be carried through?
Oh, it's hard to say. I don't know. I hope so too. I agree with everything you just said. That it's just so many resources are put towards this, and it just seems like kind of this doesn't require this kind of vigilance against it. I'm kind of interested too in Phyllis Kahn's industrial hemp bill, which I think it's harder to get high smoking industrial hemp, and I think it would be really good for Minnesota's economy if people could start growing new crops when other crops may or may not be floundering.
Gives you a hell of a headache too. And on the federal level, Barney Frank and Ron Paul have teamed up to introduce similar legislation in the U.S. Congress regarding industrial hemp. Is that also something that it's a resource that's out there, that's available, that's currently being regulated by the federal government? Is that something you wouldn't mind seeing come out to light?
I gotta confess ignorance with the whole industrial hemp business. It's one of those things, sort of like the transnational highway that Ron Paul supporters, God love them all, bring up and kind of make my eyes glaze over and pray for a painless death. Sorry.
So that leaves 157 bills for you to talk about, Mitch.
Okay, how much time do we have? I'm looking for, medical marijuana I'm interested in. The ending of the nuclear moratorium, I don't know that I see that necessarily going through the legislature this year. We were talking about this in the green room off the air here. The Senate, I believe, has voted to end the moratorium. The House is still sticking on it, I believe. I'm thinking, I don't know that I see it getting out of committee this year, but I think it's one of those votes, and we'll come back to this in a moment here, that I can see people, the pro-energy crowd coming back to in a couple years going, okay, all you poor people who are being jacked up by Xcel Energy every month, these are the people who voted against lowering your electric bill. Go to it. I'm looking at any bill that involves mindless appropriation mongering. Anything that Phyllis Kahn authors is a good place to start. And the big one along the lines of those bills that I just sort of looking forward to bringing up in a couple years is Senate 893, and I forgot the number of the House companion bill. Pat Paraso is bringing back the Stand Your Ground bill. And it's going to die in Judiciary Committee. I know it will. But it came up last year. Tony Cornish from Good Thunder brought up the bill that would essentially clarify the conditions under which a Minnesotan could use lethal force in self-defense. It was terribly misrepresented in the media, including, may I say, the Minnesota Independent. And it's one of those bills that is going to be brought back up by perhaps the most well-organized grassroots movement in Minnesota, the Second Amendment movement, in a couple of years, in the same way votes against concealed carry were brought up to basically extinguish all anti-Second Amendment DFL outstate legislators about 10 years ago when that bill was current. I think you'll see more of that coming up as a result of the treatment of 893 here. I rest my case.
Right, and the Second Amendmenters are rather concerned about the, at least on the federal aspect of things with the Obama administration limiting gun rights. And that's received a bit of negative attention in the news recently.
I don't know if I dare talk about that, lest someone go nuts and do something stupid. Don't do anything stupid, people.
Yeah. So this will wrap up our downloadable portion of the program. We're going to return with some more live discussion at the roundtable right after this clip. And don't forget to join us every Sunday at 2 o'clock with the Weekend Uptake. For everyone watching live, the fun continues right after we grab another beer right here on the Weekend Uptake.
5, 4, 3.